that's just kind of what goes with that article. That's the subtext of the article is that our system does not work very well, and it's harming people, and people are actually literally dying because of it, and nothing changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else do I have in my email?
So that's the negative side of the DACA recipients are now going to be eligible for,
Yes.
the Affordable Care Act. That's a good thing. That's
That is
somebody actually changing the system so that it
right.
works for more people.
And
Uh,
that was done apparently without Congress. I don't know. Let me take another look at that.
I think it was an executive order. I think he just
I
did
think
it.
so.
But
So that might be the kind of thing that that other article was talking about.
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it was announced by Biden. Um, so whether it was an executive order or what, I don't know the specifics, but it came out of the executive office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this article is fairly short. Yeah. But yeah, so that's an example of the strategy versus the program.
Mm-hmm.
I think a decent example of that.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, that article made a very good point that changing the way the system works is, in the long term, is a much better um, way of going about affecting real change. It would help if it were easier to publicize and make the people that are going to be affected by it more aware of what's happening and why, and all that. But
Hmm.
it's still, if you're trying to do good, then do good whether anybody knows about it or not. And I don't know. In the end, they'll all understand, or maybe they won't. Or but you'll have done
Yeah,
good. So I guess
yeah,
that's the idea.
yeah. And I think part of it is just getting the system to work not only like it did before the Trump administration
Mm-hmm.
funded, but better than it did because the wait times for processing have been ridiculous. This one article, um, is it this one? Yeah, it's saying that um, he says the crisis at the this is back to the one from the Hill.
Mm-hmm.
The crisis at the border is in large part because our legal immigration system is fundamentally broken. For the millions of people who attempt to go, oh, it just jumped on me, to go through the legal immigration system, they are met with backlogs that will have some waiting 150 years to become permanent residents.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't heard that one before. A backlog of more than 1 million work permits, a global lack of visa interview availability to even come to the United States, a system that ridiculously allows for only 140,000 employment based green cards per year in a nation with millions of job openings. So, yeah, if some of those bottlenecks could be dealt with, that would improve things quite a bit.
Yes,
Which is not to
absolutely.
say our system is is not still broken, but we could make it a little less broken, maybe.
Yes, and we're facing a future in which there will almost undoubtedly be more people wanting to move from place to place than less people, and
Right,
urgently wanting, or needing, I should say, needing
right.
to move from place to place. The climate change is causing enormous disruption already, but it's not always being described that way. It's not always being labeled as such. So
Hmm.
we're still hearing about it as piecemeal things coming from here and there, like, oh, crime in your home country, let's say, or lack of jobs or something like that. We're hearing it described in these terms that make it sound like, well, that's their problem. Why don't they just fix their problem and then they won't? Why do they come to us? But it's not necessarily their problem. It's partly caused by us, and it's very much caused by all of us, and it is a problem that we all have to deal with and all are going to have to deal with. And too often the answer is just, well, my answer is just say no, and no, we're fine here, so don't worry about them. Let's worry about us. That is too often the response that people make, not realizing that all you're doing is, by continuing to have these bottlenecks in place and intentionally keeping them in place, as some people are doing, you're just increasing the pressure. And the more you
And
increase the
then,
pressure, the more you increase the problems. So,
and then the border does feel like a crisis.
yeah, it becomes a crisis because it's turned into a crisis by
Hmm.
our response to it.
Right. Right.
If we just decided for some reason that only the us two were going to get to eat full meals, and everybody else in the building that we say that we lived in was going to get one meal a day, uh, that's not going to work. It might work for a little while, and we might be
Yeah.
fine, and we might go, I don't see the problem. I'm fine. It's your
Yeah.
problem. You figure it out. Sooner or later, that's going to become a crisis, and it's because of our decision, and then we're not going to like what happens. But I guess maybe the logic is that's somebody else's thing to deal with in the future, and we don't have to deal with it right now, so we're not going to worry about it or something like that. I'm not sure.
But yeah, I mean, where's our sense of compassion? I think there's this notion that we can isolate ourselves off from the rest of the world.
Hmm.
But I mean, I know we're not as powerful as we once were, but I think we still are the richest nation in the world, or we certainly have plenty of resources.
Hmm.
Um, we still are one of the most powerful nations in the world, if not the most. If we don't have room for people, who will? I mean,
I don't
when Syria happened,
know.
Lebanon took in so many Syrian refugees that at one point, 1 in 3 or 4 people was an immigrant in Lebanon. Now, Lebanon is a broken country. Their government is dysfunctional.
Hmm.
And some might argue, well, that's what will happen to us. But I think they're two separate issues, actually.
Yeah, that wasn't
um,
why that came about. That's a whole.
right, right, right. But so, yeah, Lebanon and Turkey took a lot of Syrians. And I think perhaps before Trump was elected, we may have been a little more open to that. But then he did the Muslim ban, and that was the end of it.
Hmm.
Um, so that's like, it just, I don't know. I don't have the words for it.
Hmm.
But people can be so uncompassionate when people are hurting
Hmm.
and lives are in danger. I don't get it.
Well, it's like I said, it's a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way that people react to emergencies. Some people
Mm-hmm.
will immediately try to help somebody next to them. The other people will just try to walk over both of you on their way out.
Mm-hmm.
Those are those are two kinds of reactions, and it's just the
Yeah.
way that people are, and
Yeah.
you're not going to necessarily change them by appealing to their better nature because they either don't have one or it doesn't operate in that way. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, that's again. I'm very cynical tonight for some reason. I'm like, you can't change it. You can't fix it. There's nothing you can do. I don't
Yeah.
mean that. There are lots of things we can do. We just have to recognize, I guess, the limitations of persuasion and maybe take into account that there might be other ways to deal with things that don't require people who don't care to start caring.
Yeah.
I don't think we can rely on that, I guess is what I'm saying. We're going to have to
Yeah.
rely on other things, like appeal to their economic uh, benefits, appeal to their, I don't know what. I'm not sure, other than money, how you're going to get through to somebody that just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Um, you have to make them care for some reason, and that's usually the way to do it. Is say, well, you can make more money if you do this. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend um, who, a number of years ago, after he retired, he started volunteering at Parkland with some of the ESL classes.
mm-hmm.
Um, and he said to me at one point, he said, typically I would have been very hard nosed about this immigration issue, but meeting these people and hearing their stories has really helped change my viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people never meet immigrants because
No.
we, we often live separate lives because of language. Um, I don't know, but maybe you see them in the grocery store, but you don't have any connection, no life connection. And I think that's a shame because I just feel like the immigrants in my life have really enriched my life. But
Sure. Well, it's the same thing. Travel enriches you too. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people are like, I don't want to do that. It's, I
yeah,
like my own house.
yeah.
They just don't want to go anywhere. And
Yeah, I have a
I'm like
sister
that.
that has no interest whatsoever in travel, and it's just like, how did you come out of the same family?
Yeah, that's true.
Because everybody else in my family has at least some interest in it. My parents certainly
Hmm.
enjoyed it, but
Well, I stay home most of the time. I don't
well, I
go
do
out
too.
very
But
much.
I like to get out of town once in a while, and the opportunities I've had to go out of country have been good.
Hmm.
But
Well, it makes a difference. It's definitely enlightening, and I would encourage anybody who is listening to this show to consider who do you spend your time with, and could you maybe meet and get to know other people? Because you're right, that makes a huge difference in how you think about things
it does.
when you get those different perspectives. If you don't get those perspectives, then you don't know what they're thinking, and all you see is what they do, or what they look like, or how they act, and your interpretation of that might be way off. It's been really interesting. I don't know if this is doesn't really have anything to do with immigration, but just in terms of understanding other people. Um, there was very recently a kind of a uproar over the Dalai Lama and his reaction with this kid. He had an interaction with this young boy, and people were just instantly judging him as like, oh, he's like this crazy, pedophile and all this stuff. And other people were saying, you don't understand the culture that's going on here at all. And so you're judging him based around something that you just don't understand. And so I don't know one way or the other. I'm not going to say pro or con. I'm just going to say that was really interesting to me to read about that and see people's reactions to it, and realize that I don't know anything about Tibetan culture, or I don't know enough about it to know whether what was going on there was a reasonable, normal reaction. Could it have been a joke? Was it, what was that exactly, and how much does
Mm-hmm.
my limited understanding affect the way I interpreted it? And in a world that's becoming increasingly global, in the sense that we are aware of and we are exposed to things around the world, our our lack of understanding of the other ways that people are
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is a serious impediment, and it can really cause
Mm-hmm.
problems in how we interpret them. And that happens right here at home, with people seeing immigrants. They don't speak English. Why are they why do they come here and they can't speak English? You know, just those kinds of notions lead to sort of pre-prejudice you against
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
As someone who works with the public a lot in my regular job, I have people from other cultures come in, and their notions of how to go about buying something is different. Some people automatically bargain, and just for them, you can't just say, "Oh, the price is X," and they go, "Okay, here's the money." You know, they feel
Hmm.
compelled. It's
Hmm.
part of their culture to
Hmm.
bargain with you on that and to
Hmm.
argue about it. And I've had moments where was irritated by that, just like,
Hmm.
look at this is the price. Why are you arguing with me? But you know, then realizing that's not. It's not even a compliment or an insult. It's neither. It's just the way they do it. So it has nothing to do with me. It has more to do with
Right.
our different cultural understanding of what this process that we're going through is. And I can see, I can definitely see from those moments how someone could just become annoyed and just kind of put off
Hmm. Hmm.
by the other cultures and the way they behave and your interpretation of that. So I guess I'm not making a really big point here. I'm just saying I do understand how people can feel sort of this sense of, I wish they'd just stay over there and not come here
Hmm.
because I don't want to have to change anything or learn anything or grow in any way in order to accommodate their presence. I want to continue doing things the way I always have and have that be that. And so it it makes sense, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah. I I think for me, one of the things that opened my eyes, I mean, long before I took on immigration as a passion, but
Mm-hmm.
was part of that formation was taking language.
Mm,
Actually, I had a horrible experience in elementary school with Spanish, and I vowed I would never, ever, ever, ever take it again.
right.
So then, when my dad said, "You have to take," I was signing up for junior high. I said, "You have to take at least 2 years before you graduate from high school." I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh,
oh, I don't want to do that.
okay, I'm going to take them right away, get them out of the way, and I'm going to take French." So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But taking French helped me to see that there are other perspectives in the world.
Yeah.
And then later, when I was in my 50s, then I finally started taking Spanish, and I can speak Spanish way better than I can speak French.
Hmm.
Um, but but I think language is one of those doors. Now, a lot of people are not going to do that for fun or for the bizarre reasons I did, but
Yeah.
but but it is an open door to seeing people, you know, at least if your
Mm-hmm.
classes engage some with culture as well. Um, but something else you said that triggered something. Oh, I know. I The other day I heard part of a NPR program. I didn't hear the whole thing, but it was a guy who'd married an immigrant and
Mm-hmm.
was they were living in Canada because they couldn't live together in the US because of the immigration laws.
Oh, yeah.
And the interviewer was interviewing him, and apparently he was like a former congressman or a former politician of some point. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, "Well, now in the past you 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 held these positions. Am I correct?" And he kind of goes, "Yeah, yeah, that is what I held." And it all changed when he married an immigrant.
Mm.
Um, and now he's trying to make a way for Americans who have immigrant spouses that can't live together in the U.S. because of our laws. And
Mm-hmm.
but um, but yeah, if you don't have that personal encounter, oftentimes you don't. You only see through an American perspective, closed off from other perspectives.
Yeah. And one thing, you know, about the U.S. that's different from, say, a lot of European countries, certainly, it is such a huge place that it is possible to live your whole life and even do a fair amount of traveling and still never leave the United States.
Yeah.
So you are not exposed to those differences because, if you live in France or Italy or whatever, you're surrounded by these other countries. And so other languages are very common, other cultures are very common. All these things, you're more cosmopolitan
Right.
by circumstance than you are in this country. So it is much easier to be a little more, it's not necessarily open minded, but at least a little more aware of what's going on in the world. And then we also have the fact, which is kind of strange but interesting, that our media has kind of dominates world media. Our movies, our style of music, lots of things like that just has pretty much overwhelmed the rest of the world in a lot of ways. And so what you see in foreign media a lot of the time looks to you like bad imitations of what we're doing, and in some instances it actually is a bad imitation or a slightly not quite getting it imitation of American movie making, say, for example. But in other instances, what reads as that is actually a different attitude altogether about things. Um, so it it's kind of works to our detriment to be so powerful and so rich and so uh, overbearing in the world that we really are able to not see things. And you can, along with not running into it personally, you can also not run into it through your media consumption either.
Oh, yeah.
And then you just don't, it's just like the whole world is America, is what it looks like to us. And it's very much not that. And if people would read more history and understand, like, for example, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, you would see that we are not in a good place in the arc of American history. This is not a good place
Oh,
to be, and we really should be rethinking the way we go about doing things. But we're doing the exact same thing they did, pouring more and more money into our military and trying to retain our global dominance that way instead of through persuasion, which is how we gained it in the first place. Um, so we'll see. Hopefully that history will not repeat itself quite so dramatically, but it could. And
yeah. And even, well, before the huge rise of social media as a media platform,
mhm.
like, for example, when we had news magazines that were printed,
Yeah.
um, I was I was visiting a friend in New Zealand, and her father, who was very, very interested in America and things American, um, wanted to have a discussion with me, and it's like, how can you guys accept this? What are we reading in our magazine? And I had
Mhm.
heard on some alternative site that the Time magazine that we get and the Time magazine that other countries got were not exactly the same. The
Yeah.
content wasn't always the same.
Mhm.
And I said that to him, and he was shocked.
Ah.
You mean, and um, shocked and fascinated at the same time. we stayed up way late talking, but he was like drilling me on all this stuff American,
Hmm.
some of which I could respond to, some of which I couldn't.
Yeah.
But but
Well, some is hard to respond to because it's a different understanding of the situation. I know that during like the civil rights era, um, a lot of people around the world saw that whole process in a very different way than we were understanding or we were given to understand it. We were led to understand it here. And in much starker terms than it was painted here. And I would say, in retrospect, in much more realistic terms than the way we were approaching it in our media here, because there was definitely an effort to soften it and downplay it and make it sound like more like a friendly rivalry, a jostling for position rather than a cry for freedom and
yeah,
to get out from under oppression. But so a lot of it, our understanding of ourselves, I think, is warped as well by the propaganda that
Yeah.
we experience here.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've actually gone over our hour here, surprisingly enough. So I suppose I can edit a little bit of this out, but
Yeah. You've kind of gone beyond your immigration. But
yeah,
those are parts of the ability to understand other people.
yeah, it's all part of the same larger question, which is why aren't we? How can we be more welcoming to people coming from other places, and is it good to do that? And I would say that we're both coming from the same place, which is yes, it's very good to do that. It's you grow as a human being from experiencing people from different places and from going to different places. So just as you said you like to travel and you've been to a number of different places, so immigrants are coming from a different place and we are a different place to them, and they are experiencing us in that same like, whoa, this isn't exactly what I expected. I thought it would be more like this, and it's more like that. Um, so we're all enriched by
Mm-hmm.
mingling like that and by sharing our different things. I always like to compare it to food. Like, so many people eat quote unquote ethnic food and they love it. Um, that's other cultures coming in and giving you
Right,
stuff,
right.
and you're
I
growing from
remember.
it, and
I
you're
remember
and
when Champaign Urbana had steak
yeah.
restaurant and steak. There was no ethnic food,
Well, maybe
or
one
maybe a
or two
Chinese
Chinese
restaurant,
restaurants. Yeah, that was about it,
or two.
and
But
maybe
other
one
than
at
that,
an Italian restaurant.
and yeah, an Italian, and
But that was it.
maybe Fiesta Cafe.
No, that came later though. But when I was a
Yeah,
kid, it was you
but
had
yeah.
Italian food, which was spaghetti, and a
Mhm.
couple of other weird things, and pizza. And then you had Chinese food, which was who knows what that stuff is. And then the rest was all, like you say, steak,
Yeah,
hamburgers,
yeah,
baked potatoes, stuff like that. And it was just
yeah.
all, they were all replicas of the same thing. Then there was a French restaurant that came.
I do remember that.
And
Yeah.
that was like, everyone's like, ooh, we have a French restaurant, a French chef. And there's all this stuff. And now it's, we have all sorts of things to choose from. And we're richer for it. We
Yeah,
are better off for it. It's not like, what happened to good old steak and potatoes? You can still get that. It's not
but why
gone.
would you?
It's just, there are more options to choose
Yeah,
from.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know,
I'm
I
happy
think
for that.
for people that don't understand the importance of other cultures and diversity, I think that's a good way that you can kind of get to them and put it in language that's easy
Hmm.
to understand.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's my opinion, anyway. Well, anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking
Well,
this time. I'm sorry that it's been hard for us to get together. I know I've been off and on again and not around that much. So hopefully we can pick some time that'll work for all of us and keep doing it.
yeah, yeah. Fridays is often good for me. A lot of the other nights I've got stuff,
Yeah.
but not always till late. So yeah,
Yeah.
few nights I'll be free at 8:30 ish. But
Sounds
yeah.
good.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will try to
You're
turn
welcome.
this into a show, and it'll go out.
All right.
Okay, we'll see you next time. Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.